Hello there, and as usual, I'm Aaron from Stand Gamers, and welcome. So last week I set you guys with a challenge, and that was to build a transport vessel or the original drop pod, make your own version, fill out the interior of it with whatever necessary items you feel are applicable. Now, a lot of you guys decided to make the whole drop pod to transport the originally shaped pod, and some of you adapted the pod yourself. Now, these are a few of the creations that I picked up from the links in the bottom of the last video. Now, I couldn't pick them all, or else I'd be reviewing them all bloody day. But what I'm going to do is take a look around each one of the ones I've picked, and so I don't get confused with names, I'm going to put the name up on screen of the creator, and there'll be a link down below in the description if you want to check that particular design out. So first off, let's actually start with the pod. Now, I didn't just challenge you to build the dropship, instead you could build a pod instead with the original sort of design. So quite funky here. Now first off, a lot of you guys did re-engineer my button set out because it was extremely stupid. So we've got the reset landing gears merge block, very important when you want to connect up to the pod. And if we open the pod door here, we actually have access to a drone 3D printing pod. Now this one prints his own custom designed drones out. So you can see we've got the design of the drone here, already on the 3D printer, and we have the welders behind it. And over here we have this amazingly cute little welding station. So we've got the readout at the top, we've got emergency factory stop, the lights come on as we get over here, initialize production, as well as resume production. Very cool. So we've got this button, so let's hit the initialize production button. Okay, so there is a countdown. There is the drone. The drone is actually spinning around on this building table. Very cool idea, you see. So we've got a turret on top of there, we've got a few reactors, and there we go. The drone has been produced. It centralizes at the front there. We can now take control of that drone and drive it off. It's actually come out itself. Ah! I didn't expect that. So there we go. The drone has actually come out, launched itself from the pod. I didn't even touch anything, so it must have been on a secondary timer block that as well. So that's an even cooler feature. So there we go. That's a little drop pod drone creator that we've got up first. So let's move on secondly. We've got my ship that we don't need to review. I just thought we'd hold for comparison for scale and size. So we next up have this beautiful little design. It uses the original pod once again, but there is a few interesting changes. So if we come around the back to this pod actually has two doors, so we can access it from front and the back. And the creator of this pod has also designed a version with a stacker truck or various vehicles to actually transit in here. And there are a few inside pod modifications. Number one is the buttons are accessible both from inside as well. That I think is quite cool. And you've also got a camera inside, so you can see exactly what's going on. So that's quite important, quite a nice addition to the pod itself. But the ship for transporting this thing is another extremely cool addition. Now look how he's reinforced these holding cells around the edge. Now there's not as much sort of lower reinforcement like I did in my... Oh my god, it's still producing drones. We need to stop that thing. So going back to this ship, you can see the two reinforced sides with the combination of Gatling turrets. So there is some protection offered for when you're dropping this in. And then we've got these atmospheric thrusters on these sort of racks that have been ribbed and created across. So it's a very sort of light design. So most of the weight that it's actually going to be carrying is focused in the pod. Very cool little concept. Two cockpit setup as well as the remote control block on the top, and you do get quite a good view from the cockpit. So if we stop in here, we can see left or right of us, but we can't exactly see the pod unless we go into third person. But let's move on to the next one. Now, I didn't specify what sort of mods could be used when I was talking about this. So this one uses the small ship mod pack. So you can actually see up here, we've got a cool little access way. And if I pop inside and actually turn the engines on here, there we go, we've got a little bit of a light up. We've got this cool cockpit. Once again, limited visibility, but it's nice having a bit of interior in one of these drop pod based ships. So we'll take around the back and have a look down the side. So you can see he's wrapped these engine bays around the side of the pod, both protecting it and just following the curves of the design. I think it's very important. And up here you can just see the detailing work he's put across there. It's a very nicely shaped something. It reminds me of something, if you've ever played 40k, that the Tau Empire would particularly have. And then you've got the pod here on the bottom. Accelerate off. Now I do warn you, this pod is supposed to have thruster damage off, so there may be some sort of damage caused to the inside of the shape. Well, that is a cool looking ship, especially when the pod's been released as well. So we'll just set that to hover there. I am expecting some damage to the ship itself. Well, let's check out that pod and see how easy it is to release the little ship inside. We'll drop down, activate our leggies. There we go. You can see how slow we're actually moving due to the lag that's being caused by all these ships. Pop that door down, and we can pop inside. So he's actually created some pipework and a Gatling turret inside to offer a little bit of protection when the button's activated. And there we have the drone that's suspended and these cool little seating on ribs on either side. So let's try to have a look here. So we've got the merge block on the back. We've also got a way of driving this, unless this is some sort of drone-based rover. I'm guessing it is. We'll have to release that and have a look at it. Let's go to the insert fuel. We've got a button as well. What's this? Merge block toggle on and off. So, oh, this is a quick way of disconnecting it. Very nice. So there we go. We've actually released the small drone, and by the looks of it, it might actually roll out the front itself. So let's activate our spectator camera and just see that deploying. Oh, very cool indeed. Very nice little feature. You could imagine deploying a few troops to an area with that. Reinforced as well. So 4 seats as well as the merge block at the back. A little bit front heavy, but let's actually just delete this for the moment so we've got a little bit more room. And we'll continue moving through. Now, something I didn't think of when I was building this is, what about if you wanted to use it on an existing ship? And this design is very simple, but I saw this and thought the existing ship concept is something that needs to be addressed. So we've actually got this little platform that is an adapter for the pod itself. Just a quick one there, but still a cool concept. So moving on, these next 2 designs are by the same creator, but I thought they both offered some rather interesting concept. So this one is very square, very flat, uses up a lot of small blocks, so it's going to be pretty damn heavy compared to the pod that it's carrying as well. The cockpit is nicely tucked in the center here with 2 spotlights and the Gatling gun, and you see it has that Thunderbird sort of feel, but it's a lot squarer, where he kind of refines it and actually creates the Thunderbirds to replica in his second design there. So I'll just pop in the cockpit and show you a quick feature of this one that I quite like. So this one has like 2 doors. So let's initialize this. Let's flip that door forward so you can see that flips open. So you can actually access the second door while you're inside if you wish. That I thought was just a generally cool concept. And let's unmerge our blocks and just take the ship off. So you can see how it actually covers the pod. There we go. Let's pop ourselves out and access the pod in the center. But I just like the idea that you could access the pod while it's still in the ship, so you can make it easier to load and whatnot. So let's access this, and let's just reverse that small hinge. So inside there's a Gatling turret, a number of seats, and a spare little rover. So what I've quickly done is I've deleted some of the other ships so we can actually continue without all the lag. So this one is an actual replica of Thunderbird 2. It has a lot of awesome cool features. It has flexible wings at the side as well as an open and closing hatch that I'll quickly show you now. And it's also got the retractable landing legs of Thunderbird 2 as well. So if I actually hit number 5, you can see it extends the legs down. Now it doesn't extend them long enough so that I could actually push the pod out, but it does extend them to quite a nice little level. So there's also actually auto locking landing gears in this particular design. So we've also got the hatch, and if we press that, we fold up the wings too. And there we go, we can close the hatch. So if I quickly open the hatch and we pop inside, and I just take a little bit of a higher seat. So this access hatch actually gives us access to an area that's pretty damn cool. We've got 2 catwalks either side, access to the cockpit, of course access to the hatch, so we can close that up from the inside as well. And we've also got access to the rear pod, so we can actually open and close this rear pod from inside. That will kind of get jammed in this area, but it means you can actually enter into the pod if you do need to from this particular area. So inside here, Thunderbird's pod vehicle assembly area. In order to transfer in a blueprint, the modules has to be attached to the structure. So these guys are like a pre-assembled minding sort of welding grid. Pretty damn cool. Very nice little concept. So let's actually pop this door back closed. You can see how he's made this little access port for us. And there we go. Fold that door back up, and what we'll do is we'll drop this pod down using the big red button. So let's actually get to an outside perspective so we can see this when we drop it. Okay, there we go. Pod's been dropped down to the ground. Perfect. And then we can fly away, of course, with Thunderbird 2. We can also do all this from the cockpit if we wanted to make it a bit more streamlined. But it's just nice having a Thunderbird type ship. We can, of course, retract our landing gears back up. Just a lovely design. I really like this one. I just like how it replicas Thunderbird 2 so well, but is still at the same time rather functional for moving this pod. So once we're down here, We can, of course, drop the actually pod door, and then we're greeted once again with the informational board, and we can assemble ourselves our very own either welding, mining ship, or whatever little ship we want to. So this is clearly thruster powered, and we can either put the drill or the welder on it at a time. Very cool concept. Anyway, let's continue moving on. Now, this particular designer wanted to do two things different. He wanted to redesign the pod and redesign the dropship itself. Now, what's cool about this is the cockpit is actually hidden. Just look how he's took time and consideration. Now he's piped everything together. Very vulnerable to enemy fire, but at the same time, it's an artwork in its own, getting everything piped up between the hydrogen and the standard type thrusters. He's also got iron thrusters on here, so he's pretty much sorted it for every possibility. So let's get this to the cockpit area, and I'll show you the next setting. So if we hit the timer block, it will prepare everything for us, drop down the parachutes, you can see, and if we were dropping that from above, it would deploy it perfectly. Well, since we're dropping it from such a low altitude like this, all we really need to do is turn the merge blocks off. So the merge blocks are off, drops below the ship, and you've got a very functional, very movable sort of framework that can be used to pick up another pod. I love how it's got that curve on it as well at the same time. So let's have a look at his pod as well. So if we pop down there, move down into position, we can see he's changed his pod up just a little bit. We've got this piston door that extracts outwards. So that's the landing gears. That is the door. So there you can see the door folds down. You can extend the pod outwards. That I think is really cool as well. You can see how that door extends on outwards, making the pod longer. Like a really cool fold out concept where we've got ourselves a little bit of a ship so we can buzz around. And in the back of the pod, he's put everything we need in here to survive, i.e. the refinery, the assembler, the oxygen generator, the cryopods so we can recharge our oxygen, and I believe there's also a med bay over here on this side. All very simple, very easy to use equipment, but I just like the idea how it pops out. It reminds me a little bit of a camper van in that aspect, and you've got a very steep sort of ramp, so you won't be loading many rovers in here, but it's still good for what it is for gaining access by foot. Now we're moving on to the final design we're taking a look at. Now this is another sort of skeleton based design that is heavily armored, heavily equipped with weaponry, and it's got a lot of redundant sort of power sources at the same time. It just looks beautiful. This also kind of reminds me of like a bug with the solar panels that you can extend and rotate around as well. So let's grab ourselves the cockpit that I believe is over here. Now what's great about this particular cockpit is you can see when you're about to drop it. So if we just take it up and down, see we've got a lot of movement. The only thing that I would worry about is them solar panels if they decide to go a little bit crazy on us. So let's drop our pod. There we go. Pod's dropped very easy, very simply. We've got great movement of this ship as well. Gyroscopes are a little bit slow, but you kind of expect that for a drop sort of ship. And now we also have the rotors. So if we press the correct rotary button, if I remember which one it is, we should be able to fold everything out. So there we go. We're actually going to attempt to fold up our solar panels so we can actually fly. Look at that. Just an extra cool feature. I love using solar power. It's not super efficient in Space Engineers at the moment, but it's good enough to get you started if you need to. See that curve at the back? All the thrusters have been stuck in there at various elements, especially this cockpit as well is much better for lining up because you can actually see the pod in front of you rather than some of the other designs. So there'll be a link to each one of these in the description below. Make sure you check them out. They're a lovely bunch of creations, and there is loads more, I believe, on the workshop by other creators who attempted to get into this challenge. I'm sorry I couldn't feature them all, and my plan next week is to try another challenge of a different type for you guys. Anyway, I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.